Christmas films are not a genre I'm overly attached to. I hate the Hallmark movies, I hate most holiday classics, and I tend to watch more alternative Christmas movies during this period, so full disclosure, this list is gonna involve a lot of alternate takes on Christmas movies. So I handpicked 30 films I actually even have the least bit to say about because there's a ton of films that could or even should be here, but I have no way of talking about them or haven't had enough experience to include them fairly. So these are our 30 movies, a decent range of universal classics and some more underappreciated films that I consider Christmas movies, and this is our tier list, so let's just go, let's get into it. Starting with Home Alone, and I've included all the Home Alones here except the 5th and recent 6th one because I have never seen either of them and I really didn't care to see them just for this video. So of course, starting with the first, the classic Home Alone, I'm gonna be very honest, I don't care much about this film at all. I have seen it a few times in my life, but whenever it's on now, I'm not gonna bother. Macaulay is honestly my least favourite of the three main Culkins, Kieran of course being the go-to actually does appear in this movie anyway, and even Rory coming in second. I just don't find this film endearing or that magical. The Chris Columbus touch is for sure there, and he gets great performances out of all of the kids as he always does, but the film doesn't get me in the Christmas mood, nor do I ever watch it during the jolly season. The best thing about this film is John Candy riffing as a favour to John Hughes, who wrote and produced the film, and Joe Pesci being Joe Pesci. Also, fun fact, did you know that this film and its sequel was edited by Roger Gosnell, who directed both of the live-action Scooby-Doo movies? Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna put this in, it's fine, by the way. It's fine. It's a fine movie. Okay, so my feelings for Home Alone essentially apply to the second film, which I like just an inch more. I think the setting does feel a bit more Christmassy and more grand, but this movie gets two knocks against it for having Trump in it, and also who I'm pretty sure is Piers Morgan with pigeons. But yeah, this movie is also just kind of fine. Moving on to Home Alone 3, this is actively the worst entry in the series despite what Roger Ebert would have you believe, and it's directed by the editor of the last two, Roger Gosnell, and it just kind of sucks because I love that dude. And despite John Hughes continuing to write and produce, without Chris Columbus behind the camera, this franchise just loses the source. Alex D. Linz is a fine enough replacement for Macaulay Culkin, and it's a shame his career ended up going nowhere afterwards, but even his cute performance can't save this thing from mediocrity. And a Christmas movie that's mediocre is worse than a regular mediocre film to me. Everything in this is just a shadow of the series' former self. It does everything the same except worse. Plus, there's no Pesci or Stern, so yeah, whack. It doesn't make me want to unalive myself, but we're getting close. And finally we have Home Alone 4, which is the cause of probably my hottest take in this video, which is that this is my favourite Home Alone movie. We had this on DVD growing up and I saw it a lot. I didn't even really connect it to the other films as a child and I just love it a lot. Marv and Vera make me so giddy. I think that they have great chemistry, and though I know they try to make these characters Kevin McAllister and Marv and whatnot from the previous movies, I just separate them in my mind as completely new characters and it works a lot better. It pulls off a pretty good twist villain, and the name Prescott is ingrained in my mind. Nobody can say that name without me thinking of this movie. I don't care if it's made for TV, the movie fucks, and I'm gonna put it into pretty good. Sue me, this movie has Eric Avery. Then we have a movie I know a lot of folks don't think about when discussing Christmas movies, but The Terminal, which I think is such an underrated Spielberg experience. It's small in scale, huge in heart, and has a beautiful romance and story of overcoming, which I think are all Christmas essentials. This movie has a glorious cast in Tom Hanks, who reminds you at least once a year when this reruns that he was actually a good actor once upon a time. Catherine Zeta-Jones, Zoe Saldana, who are both gorgeous of course, but play the romantic partner with actual pride and self-esteem that fill the screen with wonder. We have Diego Luna of Rogue One and Andor fame, Kumar Palana, who gives probably the most striking emotional moment, and of course Stanley Tucci, the Tooch, who is a delight despite playing the bad guy. So yeah, I don't know, I'm a sucker for this movie. It isn't anything overly glorious, but it has that Spielberg magic, and it's massively comfy if not perfect, which is all you can ask for, so this movie is going to go into pretty good. Then next up we have the definition of cozy, The Holiday, which is the cinephile's Christmas movie. Cameron Diaz makes corny 2000s film trailers with Jim and Agatha. There's a heavy focus on screenwriting, which I can appreciate, and old Hollywood. Jack Black not only makes scores for movies, but he does vocal renditions of classic movie scores in a blockbuster, so it's obviously a 10 out of 10. There's love, there's drama, there's betrayal, there's friendship, there's Jack Black, there's everything. Also, we have Eli Wallach, who is an absolute goat of cinema, and hearing him talk about the golden days, even though it's scripted, feels so real and pulled from actual experience and love. Plus, this movie taught me what a meet cute was, so yeah, it's the first entry in Christmas classic tier. I've cried plenty of times, and there's never a holiday season where I miss this one. Perfect Christmas movie, especially for film lovers. Next up is Miracle on 34th Street, the 1994 remake and not the original, because it's the one I'm more familiar with, and let me tell you, this film goes so hard. Richard Attenborough as Kris Kringle is ingenious casting. Mara Wilson was the 90s child actor that made everyone want kids. And with a John Hughes script, you really can't lose. I love that this film is basically a courtroom drama about whether Santa is real or not, and that's the kind of Christmas goofiness I can get behind, so it's gonna go in pretty good. I don't really have much else to say about that, it's just a good movie. Then we get to a real heavy hitter. Batman Returns, which I've spoken about many times on this channel, but yes, it's a Christmas movie, and yes, it's the best Batman movie by a mile. And Tim Burton, for a man that's so gothic and dark, really makes great and tragic Christmas movies. This is my exact kind of holiday season classic. It's cold and dark and has Danny DeVito playing a disgusting little freak. Now, as a comic book fan, this movie isn't faithful at all to what Batman and his canon is, but as a stylized interpretation of that source material, this movie has the juice. Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman, I mean, come on. I love how industrial and impossible Gotham looks in this movie, and though I understand how this was far too dark for a kid's movie and Burton was understandably removed from the sequels, I wish Burton got to keep moving with his films because I think he had another Batman Christmas classic in him. So yeah, no shock, but this is shooting to the top of Christmas classics. And next up we have How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the Jim Carrey Ron Howard one, and I know this film is super divisive, it isn't really faithful at all, and I know that, but I don't know, I grew up with this, so the nostalgia kicks in, and I just think it's very charming. The set design is incredibly detailed and wondrous, Jim Carrey is ridiculously funny, I quote this guy all the time, the makeup for not just the Grinch but also the Who's is really good, and I don't have much else to say. For all its faults, I still adore it. It's a Christmas classic and always will be in my house. Which brings me to the Illumination adaptation, The Grinch, and I absolutely despise this movie. I hate how ingrained the Grinch is in their society. He's not even evil or anything, he's just kind of moderately annoying. The designs are typical Illumination, disgusting designs. I actually did a video comparing this on the Ron Howard film, so go and check that out. It's an old video, so take it with a grain of salt and a pinch of empathy. But I'm not going to sit on this one too long. It's a stinker and I wish it would die because it makes me want to unalive myself. Then we got A Christmas Carol, the Robert Zemeckis film from when he was obsessed with photoreal animation, and as for most of those attempts go, this one is easily the most tolerable. It has a great cast with Jim Carrey, Gary Oldman, Colin Firth, and even Robin Wright, and I think it tells the story from Dickens' book pretty well as someone who has been in love with that story for a long time, but I just don't watch it ever. I saw it once at school and enjoyed it, and I've tried to watch it since, but my eyes just kind of frost over. It doesn't make me want to unalive myself, but I don't think it's on the tier of something like Home Alone. However, the same cannot be said for Barbie in the Nutcracker, which I saw an exhausting amount of times growing up with my sister, and though this isn't my favourite animated Barbie film of the 2000s, that award going to Princess and the Pauper, this is still going pretty hard. I mean, aside from the awful animation, this film feels incredibly timeless and boasts a fairly unknown cast with the notable exception of Tim fucking Curry as the Mouse King, and that alone awards it to be in the it's fine tier. I know, I set that up to go way higher, and I wish he was higher, but I know that if I'm not watching this through the pure nostalgic lens, there is basically nothing of value going on here. Which I think is unfortunately true for the next holiday classic, the Santa Claus, which I'll be honest, I only really understood the name recently. I think the idea for the film is quite brilliant and the execution of the premise is done competently enough. But like, Tim Allen is not what I want to see when I'm in a Christmas movie, nor do I think this film is anywhere near good enough to have multiple sequels and a TV show. It's a fine Christmas movie, but I just don't know who this is for. I thought I should include it because I saw it on every other tier list and I should fill out the list with actual Christmas films, but yeah, it's fine. And speaking of true to form Christmas films, we have Gremlins. Now, admittedly, this film is immediately soured because it isn't the second, which I preferred tenfold, but I gotta admit, this one does still go incredibly hard. Directed by the great Joe Dante, penned by Chris Columbus, executively produced by Spielberg and soundtracked by Jerry Goldsmith, it has a blueprint for gold. And gold it finds. The visual effects and puppetry / animatronics are highly stylized and gorgeous. It has a great Christmas heart full of triumph and underdogs, friendship and love, whilst also keeping up a few horror sensibilities. Not to mention being incredibly goofy at times, which is right in Dante's wheelhouse. It's Christmas horror camp from the 80s and endlessly watchable. I'm gonna slap it into pretty good. I don't watch it as often as some others simply because when I want to watch Gremlins, I always end up watching Gremlins 2 instead. Then we have some serious dadcore incoming with Scrooged, and I only included this one because my 40+ audience would be tearing me a new arsehole if I didn't, but they're going to anyway, because listen, I'm going to put this next to the other Christmas Carol adaptation because it doesn't make me want to unalive myself. Like, it's okay, it's whatever, Bill Murray is doing the Bill Murray thing, but there is definitely an age minimum to enjoy this. It's not bad, but that's the best I can really say about it. But a film I have entirely too much to say about is Prometheus, a film by Ridley Scott that definitely is a Christmas film and I'd argue one of the best films he's ever made, period. I remember first watching this film and really hating it because it was an alien film without xenomorphs, for the most part anyway, but as time has went on, I just saw it as a Ridley Scott sci-fi epic in the alien universe and I've become really endeared by it. It has horror, it has holiday cheer, it has vibes, it has Michael Fassbender being a little goblin man and sets up Alien Covenant, which I'm a slut for. This is everything I want in a Christmas movie, so of course it's going straight up to Christmas classic. And now everything I don't want in a Christmas film in Elf. I cannot stand this movie. It is so sickeningly cheery and I just do not care for this at all. And that hurts because I love Jon Favreau so much, but there are very few Christmas movies I hate more than this one. Will Ferrell can either really work for me or makes me want to tap dance on porcupine corpses, and guess which one this one is. So though this makes me want to hurt myself, it's not quite to the extent of ending it all, but we're getting close. But luckily we have a good movie now, A Nightmare Before Christmas, and I know there's a whole discourse on whether this is a Halloween movie or a Christmas movie, but I don't see why it can't be both. And though Tim Burton gets mostly all the credit, this really is a testament to Henry Selick and his talents. He's a director who works in the stop motion claymation field mostly, and it's evident why. The music is iconic, the aesthetic is straight from Burton's notebooks, the animation is flawless, and the story, though obviously dark, is so universal and appealing to all age groups and audience types. It's just a great and accessible film that is so individual in every single way, there's nothing else like it, so yeah, it's pretty good. Next up is Die Hard, because I think we have to include it now. There's no way to be a legitimate Christmas movie tier list without it, but to disappoint you guys, I don't enjoy this movie. I really don't at all care for it. Bruce Willis just isn't for me. This isn't the 80s action I'm looking for, and being honest, the only thing that really works for me at all is Alan Rickman as Hans Gruber. But at least the film doesn't make me want to leap off a tall building, but you know, that's about it. The same cannot be said for the second Robert Zemeckis film in this list though, The Polar Express, which is nightmare fuel. The photorealistic animation is gross, the story is whack, I hate it, destroy it. It not only makes me want to take my own life, but everyone else in the film. But luckily, next we have Jingle All The Way, and you know, it's the Arnie film with the action figure that every kid wanted. Being realistic, this film is a pile of shite, but it's got two things going for it: Arnie and a Chris Columbus script. I honestly think Columbus should have directed this himself. I think the vibes of Christmas would have been a lot more warmer and greater. I think the movie is fine, but it had so much more potential, and seriously, I really wanted this action figure. And now we have a contemporary Christmas film because I didn't see the point of doing this without presenting something new, and I chose this year's The Holdovers. I did a video on this, so it seemed pretty relevant to go and check that out for my full in-depth thoughts on this, but for now I'm going to slot it into pretty good. I do think this is a future Christmas classic given time, so yeah, it's a great movie. I did just get pretty into it, so I don't want to do it again here, so do go and check that video out because like nobody saw it either. And moving on to the second Burton film, Edward Scissorhands, which works for all the reasons you'd expect from a Tim Burton Christmas movie. It's gothic and depressing, but it's also sensationally hopeful and beautiful. Winona Ryder is wonderful, as always, and Johnny Depp had that innocence back then that plays really well. And this actually reminds you that he was once a sincere and prodigal character actor. The set design is timeless, and not in that it will be eternally great, which it will be, but in the way that it seems to exist in no real time or space. This world is retro but otherworldly, classic and futuristic all at once, also not being of any real location. There's hints of Americana in it, but there's some European influences, maybe even German expressionism. It's all over the place and weirdly cohesive, tragic and hopeful. It's a Christmas classic. Then we have While You Were Sleeping, which is directed by the guy who went on to direct The Meg, which would not clue you in on how great his rom-com chops are. Sandra Bullock and Bill Pullman in a hopeless romantic story with a fairly unique premise that's as unpredictable as you'd think and still manages to pull it off. See, what I think a lot of rom-coms get wrong these days is you need more than a wacky premise. You need to take time on the characters being more than just love interests for each other. They need to be individuals who have rapport whilst having a good amount of friction. You have to make the coming together worth it. You need to earn it. And this is cozy, it's familiar, it's pretty good. And speaking of familiar, that brings me round to our final Grinch movie, the original 1966 animated short of the Dr. Seuss novel, which is a perfect adaptation of the work and is quite possibly the greatest piece of Dr. Seuss adaptation available. The designs are straight from the book, the music is iconic, it's heartwarming, funny, and a Christmas classic quite easily. Not much else to say than that. And now a film I have even less to say about. It's a Wonderful Life. A film I adore and have on here because, well, you can't do one of these without it. It's a Christmas classic, obviously, but like, what can I say? It's a Wonderful Life. Moving on to The Green Knight, which is a film I have many conflicting thoughts on. On the one hand, I think the film can be a bit hollow and without thought sometimes. But on the other hand, it's an aesthetically god-tier movie. One of the most impressive films I have seen visually, and though it can be drawn out a bit and empty at times, I think it does give you a fair bit to consider and chew on if you invest enough into the themes and ideas. It's a film you have to meet on its own turf and you get out what you put in, and I think as time goes on, the more I've seen it, the more I appreciate it. The costume design and prosthetics are also some of the best I've seen in such a long time, and it's just so rich. We're lucky to have it, I think. Meaning, though I don't think it's quite a Christmas classic yet, I still think it's pretty fucking good. And then I suppose we have to talk about at least one Harry Potter film, and the first definitely feels the most Christmassy, and they always get played here in the UK this time of year, so yeah, Philosopher Stone. If I'm being very honest, this should be a Christmas classic, but I just don't think it is anymore. It's a film I tend to enjoy less the more I see it, which is a shame because I do like this film quite a bit. Again, Chris Columbus showing up to show motherfuckers how it's done, and yeah, this is the quintessential child's fantasy story that has some great Christmas vibes whilst not bombarding you with a holiday. I don't need to say much, we all know what the score is with this movie, everyone has seen it and basically everyone likes it, it's pretty good. Bringing us to Trading Places, which is a film I put in here without really thinking about it, but now I am thinking about it and I'm annoyed I put it here because it feels like I set it up to fail. I did used to really love this one, but being honest, it just doesn't do it for me anymore. I mean, the horrendous blackface aside, I just don't find Dan Aykroyd that funny in this. Jamie Lee Curtis doesn't work at all for me. The only constantly moving piece in this that does work for me is of course Eddie Murphy, but he isn't enough to save it. The actual Christmas stuff is pretty subtle, enough to forget that it's even a Christmas film, which is usually how I like it, but I don't know, it all just falls flat these days. Maybe I'm just getting old and grumpy. It at least doesn't make me want to hurt myself in a major way though. Which brings us to our final spot, and that is Love Actually, which, spoiler alert, I think is the greatest Christmas film of all time. I did a video about it and everything. It's a film that is so hopelessly perfect and weaves together all of these impossibly tangled storylines without a single hint of complication. It just seems so effortless. So go and see that video I did last year if you really want to know how I feel about it all, because it does have its blemishes, but come on, it's a Christmas classic if I've ever seen one. And that's it. That's every Christmas film I could be bothered to tier list. There are so many more I wanted to mention, but because of time constraints in the actual holiday season, I wasn't able to get around to, so maybe next year I'll do a big part 2 to this video. But this is the final tier list, so feel free to call me the worst possible names you can think of, and be sure to do your own tier list using the template. I'll have it in the pinned comment or description. Please do send me them on Twitter or join our Discord where we talk about movies and everything else, and whether it's a Christmas classic or not, as always, keep watching movies.